Hi everyone, welcome to the Golden Age of Self-Publishing Poetry presentation. My name is Dalma Szentpály and I am one of the hosts of Ask Ally's Self-Publishing Poetry podcast together with the magnificent director of Alliance of Independent Authors, Orna Ross. Today, I'm going to tell you how you can publish and sell your poems. But first, I would like to share with you one of my recent favorite poems about writing. At times, I want to stop writing completely when I feel it's starting to destroy me. I never want to stare at blank pages again. The word poetry makes me angry. The English language is a tsunami on my tongue, and I'm just not sure I can weather out this storm. It can be healthy spending nights this sleepless because my mind is busy forming constellations out of words. How can I be so utterly obsessed with the placement of letters but so entirely convinced they are absurd? This is a poem by Rupi Kaur. Rupi Kaur is probably one of the reasons why we can talk today about the success of poetry. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to share this poem with you. And secondly, I wanted to share this poem with you for the line, so utterly obsessed with the placement of letters. If you ever felt in your life like that, you are just utterly obsessed with the placement of letters, then probably you have made the right choice to come to SelfPubCon. But why am I the one to share with you tips about self-publishing poetry? So let me introduce myself a little. Well, I am a lifelong lover of the genre, and I have the degree to prove it. I have a BA in English and a master's degree in American literature, and I have written my thesis about a particularly tricky form of poetry called the villanelle. You should check it out if you want to play around with the different types of poetry. It's a very hard form to accomplish, but I think it pays off at the end. And I have studied it in Sylvia Plath's early poems. Moreover, I worked as a lecturer at multiple universities, and I have I have taught courses in American culture, literature, and academic writing. Next to my academic career, I have been working in the book business for the past 10 years, on and off. First, I started to work in an indie bookstore as an event manager, from poetry readings to book clubs to pub quizzes. I basically organized anything and everything. I loved it. And next to that, I headed to New York and worked at an indie publishing company. It was quite glamorous, but I decided to go for self-publishing, and currently I'm working for Publish Drive, a self-publishing platform, helping authors to distribute and promote their books worldwide to more than 400 plus online stores and thousands of libraries. If you haven't heard about us, you should definitely check us out at publishdrive.com. And from the early weeks of August, I have been working with Orna Ross for Ask Ally's broadcast, and our podcast is called Self-Publishing Poetry Salon. Later on in the presentation, I will talk to you a little bit about the podcast and what you can expect in the upcoming month from us. But now that I have introduced myself a little, I would like to go on and share with you what we are going to cover in this presentation. So first, I will going to talk about how poetry became one of the fastest growing genres in publishing. Then we'll turn to some of the big names, big poets nowadays, and what are the recent publishing trends in poetry. after that, we're going to look at how you can build up a loyal reader base and which platforms should you use to do that. Briefly, we'll cover how you can create a volume out of individual poems. We'll look at some of the tricks and some of the aspects that you should consider when creating a collection of poetry. And lastly but not least, we're going to talk about the distribution, the promotion, and the sales aspect of selling poetry. So for the question, do we actually live in the golden age of poetry? Well, there are definite signs that the genre is thriving, but probably before 2014, you wouldn't have been able to find an article that would have said so. The reason for this is for decades they considered that poetry as a genre is dead. It's niche market, only very highly educated and highbrow people read poetry, and it's not for the general public. And this all changed by Rupi Kaur and the arrival of Insta Poetry. One of the books that you should definitely consider reading is Rupi Kaur's Milk and Honey. It performed astonishingly, and it still performs astonishingly on Amazon. It has been sold 2.5 million times since its publication in 2014. It has stayed for 77 consecutive weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, and it has been translated to 25 languages around the world. I am Hungarian, and it has been actually translated to Hungarian, even though there are only 10 million Hungarian people out there. So it's definitely an incredibly popular collection of poetry. There are other spearheaders of the change in the popularity of the genre, and one of this is Amanda Lovelace. She has published first in 2015, as I remember correctly, The Princess Saves Herself in this one. And then she continued with The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one, and finished just last year with The Mermaid Regains Her Voice in this one. I think you can feel the theme, the overarching theme of the topics. And these collections of poems are immensely popular, so much so that she has been regularly nominated at the Goodreads Choice Award with astonishingly good ratings. And actually she has won it in 2016. Jane Friedman made a very, very good interview with her, so you should check it out if you have the time. So let's look at some sales figures that show that we are actually living in the golden age of poetry. Between 2013 and 2017, there have been a 21% growth in overall sales in the US in the poetry genre. That's a huge growth, and it is still growing. And in 2018, 12.3 million pounds worth of poetry have been sold in the UK. These are incredible numbers. For the past 50 years, there have never been this kind of numbers when we're talking about poetry. So what changed aside from the appearance of Insta poets, and why particularly Rupi Kaur or Amanda Lovelace were the ones that could speak to so many people that they are going to buy their collection of poems? One of the reasons for this renaissance of poetry in the late 2010s is the appearance of a new audience, millennial and Gen Z women, that definitely connected to Rupi Kaur's and Amanda Lovelace's or other female poets or poets of color. And the reason for this is that social media and generally the internet provided a very open platform for those people whose voices haven't been heard before. And the readers as well could open to those sort of texts that resonated with their own experience. In the US in 2017 there were 28 million poetry readers, and between 2015 and 2017 the figures were very interesting. What happened between only those 2 years? From 15 to 17 there have been twice as many female readers than male readers in the poetry genre. And there have been a huge growth in Hispanic, African American, and Asian American readers. So basically, in the Hispanic and African American readers group, there have been twice as many readers of poetry in 2017 than have been in 2015. And also, in the Asian American reader group, there have been 3 times as many readers of poetry than in 2015. These are very interesting figures. Also, in the UK in 2018, there have been 1.3 million copies of poetry sold. Who bought all these volumes of poems? Well, 75% of poetry readers are under the age of 34, and 41 of all of these readers are between 13 and 22. The majority of these readers in the UK as well are women. So basically the new audience are millennial and Gen Z women and women of color. So the diversity and the diverse voices provided by the democracy that is available in social media helped the renaissance of poetry in the late 2010s. So this new audience definitely responded to the political unrest that's definitely connected to the early 20th century or early 21st century, and to the empowerment in identity politics. As most of us feel, our everyday life is more and more politicized because there is an increase in socioeconomic inequality. Yet, these people were encouraged by the democracy that was provided by the internet for the disenfranchised to hear the voice of the disenfranchised. They were encouraged to share their opinion, to go out to the world and speak up, because there was a change in attitude towards sexuality, race, and gender. So they chose poetry as the most powerful tool to convey their emotions in a short message. This way, poets became the spokespeople for the voiceless people of their generation. The second reason for poetry's revival is the popularity of rap music and consequently the rise in the popularity of spoken word and slam poetry. For decades, poetry was seen as a genre for a niche elite, filled with cryptic messages, not really accessible for the general public. Then with the popularity of rap music, everyday topics became part of a rhythmic, rhyming, performative art, and then poetry slowly transitioned to that direction as well. First off, It started with performative poetry like slam and spoken word. Slam and spoken word events are more popular than ever. They're performative, they are filled with social commentary, and they are not as solitary as you reading in your room, since the performer encourages the audience to engage with the text that they're performing. And this is connected to the change in the format in our reading habits and our general habits. How are we engaging with texts? So, for example, in the US, generally people spend 1 hour and 53 minutes per day on social media, yet they only read 6 minutes per day. So, imagine if you are a writer and you want to engage with your readership. Probably the best way to engage with your readers is through social media. But what is the best format to do it? Since if you're writing a novel, you can only share in a newsletter a chunk of it, but not necessarily on Instagram or in a Facebook post or on Twitter, since you can only convey a short message or only can post a short message on these platforms. So, for that, poetry is probably the best form of text to share. So, who are these poets and what styles, what types of poetry are they writing in this Insta age? If you are a poet, I would highly encourage you to check out and read other poets' work. First of all, you can learn a lot from them, and secondly, you can find your own voice. You can be influenced by your contemporaries. First off, I think everybody should at least look once or twice at Rupi Kaur's poems. She's such a prominent figure. Maybe you're not going to like her style. Maybe you're going to fall in love with her in the first sight. You never know. But since she has such a powerful voice in today's age, if you think about posting your poetry online or publishing your own volume of poetry, you should definitely check her out. Her style is expressive poetry, which means that it's highly emotional. It evokes emotions in the reader as well. She speaks about personal trauma, grief, loss, joy as well, and love as well, but it's deeply personal. Amanda Lovelace is very similar. She is incredibly popular as well, and she speaks about trauma, but in a very different style. She uses archetypal tales quite symbolically to connect to her own traumatic experiences. Nikita Gill and Naira Vahid are very similar to Amanda Lovelace in this sense, since both of them use mythology and ancient tales to evoke archetypal female traumas or archetypal female experience within their readers. If you're not necessarily a symbolic writer, if you would like to engage with your readers more on an inspirational level, then I would encourage you to check out Reina Bidi. She's an inspirational and spiritual writer. As for R.H. Sin, who is incredibly popular, probably as popular as Rupi Kaur, he writes mainly love poems, also about everyday experiences. There are inspirational quotes from him as well. His audience is generally women readers as well. Zach Gray is gaining popularity. I believe he's probably right now the second or third on Amazon's bestseller list of poets. And Courtney Peppernell's Pillow Thoughts volumes are very popular as well, and I generally really like them. All of these poets started out on social media. It does not mean that they are independent authors anymore. A lot of them have been picked up by bigger publishing companies or a specific independent publishing house called Andrew McMill Publishing. So, how can you become a rock star of a poet? These are my suggestions. Join the online poetry community. And how can you join a community? Well, I think you should use multiple websites and find the best one that fits your style. How can you do that? You should get to know the style and social rules of the site you joined. I will show you multiple sites. They are very different. I think they are very different in style. So you'll be able to see quite a diverse range of websites. Make sure to read and comment on other poets' work. I think this is also very important. One of the reasons is that you will be able to learn from other poets. The other reason is that in order to get feedback, you should also give feedback. And you should post as frequently as you can. Maybe you've seen that the poets from the Insta age, they share sometimes 100, sometimes 1,000, sometimes 14,000 posts. In order to do that, you have to write constantly to be able to select the ones that you will be able to share because they are good enough, their quality you're satisfied with. So the first one I would like to introduce you to, if you don't know, but Tumblr is generally a good way to start to engage with other poets. You should check out some hashtags that are very popular connected to poetry on Tumblr. One of them is Poem of the Day. One thing that you should know about Tumblr, that Amanda Lovelace started out here and still she's more prominently present on this social platform and not on Instagram. So I would encourage you to check out her profile and see for yourself how she started to build her own following. Comefall is a very different website. If you're interested to experiment with forms of poetry, with multimedia, then Comefall is your place. You can see here that you see pictures: harsh, wind and rain, harsh hurricane, feel it transform, cold aching pain, suffocates your brain. How do you expect when you don't even respect yourself? How do you demand love when you don't even love yourself? These are very emotional words, and they are also connected to the pictures that are next to them. One of my favorite websites is HelloPoetry. What I like about it is it incredibly clean. So the text is the most important part of the website. Another reason why I like it is that you are not only seeing contemporary poets, but you also see classics. So for example, I included here E.E. Cummings' poem, I Like My Body When It Is With You. You can like the poems, you can share the poems, you can tag the poems. So it definitely works like a social media website. On the other hand, if you include your own poem or if you share your own poem, you can see there are a number of emojis that you can tag to your own poem. and you can browse accordingly as well. I think there are a lot of different very clever ways to make your poem accessible to the readers that are interested in the style that you're writing your poems in. So I would encourage you to check HelloPoetry out. AllPoetry is probably the biggest platform for poets, so not necessarily Instagram or Tumblr, because here you're only engaging with poets. As you can see, there are a lot of active forums where you can share and get feedback on your poems. I think right now there are about 250 user forums. You can also enter into poetry classes and poetry contests. And I would highly encourage you to submit your poems in poetry contests, since that's a very good way to get some sort of feedback from people who actually can give you detailed opinions on what you should change, how you should improve your text or form or rhythm or rhyme, whatever that you think you should focus on. Twitter is a different platform for poets, since there is a limitation on how many characters you can include. But for challenges, if you use the hashtag poetry community, you would be able to engage with fellow poets and engage with challenges with fellow poets. And you can find very nice poems on Twitter as well, and you can post your own. And it's an instant feedback. Twitter is one of the fastest social media platforms, so this way you don't have to wait long to get some sort of feedback. So, how you should form or create your own book of poetry? By editing and formatting it. One of my first suggestions is that you should write constantly in order to have a luxury to select. In a collection of poems, I would say that you should include at least 150 poems. Since right now poems are short, not necessarily longer than a page, it means that you are going to have a 150-page long book. For that to be a comprehensive collection of poetry, you need to select the ones that can be connected together, because you have to find a topic and a story you want to tell from the beginning to the end of the collection. Another highly important part of creating the collection of your poems is to decide on how the poems will be placed on your pages. Since you're going to share some pages from your collection on your social media, it should be aesthetically pleasing and it should be in connection with the topic or the theme of your book. Connecting to visuals, it's highly important as well to have a killer cover design. For that, I would encourage you to hire an illustrator. I have listed some freelancer pages here that you can use to find the best illustrator for your book. Behance, Upwork, Guru, Freelance, these are all good pages where you can find people with quality skills. What are the best stores for selling poetry? I would say that all of them. However, I would definitely include these 3 in your list. Amazon is the biggest online store on the planet, so I would definitely include my book there. Instapoets like Rupi Kaur and R.H. Sin are still bestsellers on Amazon. However, I would not limit myself on selling my collection of poems on Amazon. because Overdrive and Script are targeting the audience that is the perfect audience for poetry. Overdrive is a digital library service with 43,000 libraries in 75 countries, which means that they are providing content for schools, for universities, for mothers, so definitely for the 14 to 35 age group of women that are the most prominent readers of poetry. Also, Script, which is a reading subscription service, essentially a Netflix for readers, with over 1 million subscribers, is a good way to engage with your reading audience. Usually, college students and stay-at-home moms subscribe to Script because it's an all-access content provider. Most of the time, poets like Ruby Kaur, R.H. Sin, and other very popular poets' collections are on Script. So I would definitely encourage you to put your collection of poems to these stores for distribution. But generally, I would encourage you to distribute your poetry globally. There is a wide global market for English language content. This graphic is an actual graphic of the percentages based on published drives, actual and estimated sales across all distribution channels offered by publishdrive.com. Publishdrive.com is a self-publishing platform, as I told you at the beginning. If you have your manuscript and your cover design, you only need to upload your book and select the stores that you want to distribute your book to. If you can see this graph, it means that Amazon, Apple Books, Script, Google Play, these are all major distributing channels. So you should not limit yourself to only selling on Amazon. If you're interested about how you can distribute to all of these stores, check out our services at publishdrive.com. So as I promised in the beginning, I'm going to share with you what we are going to talk about in our self-publishing poetry salon every month. So we're going to talk about form and technique in today's poetry scene, also share some tips and tricks of self-publishing, and interview, and there are going to be interviews with trending poets as well. Also, we're accepting submissions from poets in the segment called Indie Poetry Please. If you want to submit your own poems, you should check out this website, ornaraz.com/self-publishing-poetry-podcast.